Good morning, friends. Welcome again to Empty Cloud Monastery for our third series of talks on Majjhima Nikaya 2, the Sabbasava Sutta. Welcome to Michael, Kumu, and Gita. I'm so happy to hear that your appointment went well, Michael. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Very, very well. And Gita, I found your sweet gifts in the mail 1 week in advance. Thank you so much for your thoughtful gifts. Very sweet. All right, and welcome to everyone else who's tuning in right now. So without, oh, hello, Pasikatara, good to see you. So without further ado, we can start by paying homage to our original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha, and then we'll keep on reading from the sutta. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham tamham sangham namasami. So, yesterday we went through an overview of the sutta, and then we explored taints to be abandoned by seeing. And then the sutta continues with taints to be abandoned by restraining. And so the Buddha says, what taints bhikkhus should be abandoned by restraining? Here a bhikkhu reflecting wisely abides with the eye faculty restrained. While taints, vexation, and fever might arise in one who abides with the eye faculty unrestrained, there are no taints, vexation, or fever in one who abides with the eye faculty restrained. Reflecting wisely, he abides with the ear faculty restrained, with the nose faculty restrained, with the tongue faculty restrained, with the body faculty restrained, with the mind faculty restrained. While taints, vexation, and fever might arise in one who abides with the faculties unrestrained, there are no taints, vexation, or fever in one who abides with the faculties restrained. These are called the taints that should be abandoned by restraining. So we see how here the Buddha gives an overview of eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, and how it's important to restrain them. Otherwise, we risk getting overwhelmed and overtaken by our sense faculties, which is most of our experience fundamentally. In the fire sermon, the Buddha goes to the extent of saying that everything is on fire, you know. The eye is on fire, the ear is on fire, the nose is on fire, the tongue is on fire, the body is on fire, the mind is on fire. The fire of what? The fire of greed, hatred, and delusion. So this is what fundamentally marks our experience most of the time, really. And the teachings of the Buddha are this sort of cooling water that we pour on our experience. And then that leads to happiness. But in order to do that, we need to really understand what this process does. So first of all, what is the process of, what is the experience, actually, perhaps is the better word, of having our sense faculties unrestrained? Well, our experience is fundamentally that we're constantly looking for the pleasant, and we're constantly being repelled by the unpleasant, right? And fundamentally, that's because we're not, the Buddha tells us, we're not fully understanding the gratification, the danger, and the escape in our experience with the senses. So perhaps we focus a lot on the gratification, right? So if we have, say, you know, a nice experience, then our mind you know, immediately goes chasing after that experience over and over again, wants more of it, wants it on a regular basis. You know, if we have pizza, since yesterday we had pizza, and I shared this example with you. So, like having pizza, for example, can be a very pleasant experience for some. And so the mind goes, well, that actually was a really nice experience. I would like more. I would like more, right? And we can only see that the drawback of that is that today there is no pizza coming up. There won't be any pizza offered at the monastery. So we see that the danger of getting attached or pursuing pizza is the fact that it's impermanent and it's subject to change. First of all, well, you eat while you're eating pizza, there's so much pizza that fits in the stomach. So after a while, even though there are like perhaps 50 servings, you can only have one, maybe two if you really stuff yourself. But you can't eat ad infinitum. Like you can't keep on eating over and over again. And also then once it's finished, if perhaps you only have two servings and you eat both of those two servings, then the next day you might not have that pizza. So the escape normally intuitively for us is actually to go and search for more pizza. So we're fundamentally addicts. We're kind of constantly looking for that gratification to happen. But the Buddha actually tells us another way out. So that is the teachings of the Buddha. In essence, they are of a true escape of this from this constant, pursuit of the same thing over and over again. Because really, how many times should we have pizza in order to kind of fully see that it's not actually quite fulfilling? Because it really ultimately doesn't make us happy. The happiness that we get from sensual pleasures is very short. It's very unreliable. It's really not that much. Most of it we're actually spending, most of our time we're spending not even indulging in sensual pleasure. We're spending it pursuing these sensual pleasures. And so instead of keeping the pursuit going on over and over again, the Buddha instead tells us, how about you actually just let go of the desire for these sensual pleasures? And I remember when I first, heard some of the Dhamma talks that Bhante Suttaso, the Koabut here at Empty Cloud Monastery, shared with me several years ago. I remember this reflection really made an impact in my mind. And he said, perhaps if we really crave pizza, right, and we get pizza, we think that we can't deny that there is some happiness arising in the mind, right? So we assume that acquiring the pizza is what has made us happy. But in reality, if we actually look more closely at the experience, it's not that acquiring the pizza has made us happy, but rather what has made us happy is that we gave up our craving for the pizza. So we stopped pursuing the pizza because we got it, right? So we think that it's the pizza that has made us happy, but in reality, it's that we let go of craving. And it's the craving that causes the suffering. So the Buddha teaches us to go straight to this step and relinquish the craving. And in this way, we can attain unconditional happiness. And in this way, we're fully understanding the gratification, because of course, if things weren't gratifying, we wouldn't be pursuing them. We understand the danger more fully, and we have a reliable escape. But in order to, to do this, in order to actually really practice the escape as taught by the Buddha, restraint is not optional. It's actually fundamental. So the teachings of the Buddha can be described as teachings of renunciation, and renunciation requires a lot of restraint. Letting go requires a lot of restraint. Because most of the time, actually, what we do is not let go. We hoard and we attach to it, and we're very much tight, holding it tight. We don't let go. And this experience of, of holding tight to things, this experience of actually having no restraint of the sense faculties is very central. Actually, the Buddha uses many, many similes to describe it. But one that I really appreciate is actually, that I think is very, very relatable, so to speak, is how the Buddha describes the experience of having no restraint of the sense faculties as like with a simile of tying up with a rope like 6 different animals. So a snake, a crocodile, a bird, a dog, a jackal, and a monkey. And each animal would then pull in a different direction, looking for the food. So we have here a little sutta quote of this sutta, the Chapana Kopama Sutta, Samyutta Nikaya 35-247. The Buddha says, "Now when these 6 animals become worn out and fatigued, they would be dominated by the one among them that was the strongest. They would submit to it and come under its control. So too, when one has not developed and cultivated mindfulness directed to the body, the eye pulls in the direction of agreeable forms, and disagreeable forms are repulsive. The ear pulls in the direction of agreeable sounds, and disagreeable sounds are repulsive. The nose pulls in the direction of agreeable odors, and disagreeable odors are repulsive. The tongue pulls in the direction of agreeable tastes, and disagreeable tastes are repulsive. The body pulls in the direction of agreeable tactile objects, and disagreeable tactile objects are repulsive. The mind pulls in the direction of agreeable mental phenomena, and disagreeable mental phenomena are repulsive." Sounds familiar? So we're constantly in this struggle. We're constantly being, pulled, just like in this simile of all these different animals, right? And then at the very certain point, one of these animals, the strongest ones, has sort of the best, the better on everyone else. And so it's kind of like the same. Then we see how one of the sense faculties has a particular predominant sphere amongst all the rest in our experience. And so the instructions of the Buddha are to restrain ourselves. And how do we restrain ourselves? Well, he actually mentioned it right here. So the opposite of what a monastic does when, or a practitioner does when actually in those in that conditions. So it's fundamentally we need to develop and cultivate mindfulness directed to the body. So then, taking back the simile, the animals, instead of after pulling here and there, instead of actually there being one that wins over the others, the animals would become worn out and fatigued and stay close to the post that they're tied in, right? And they would lie down, etc. So we would not fundamentally be enslaved by the senses, which is pretty much a good way to describe our experience when we're pulled by all our, the eye goes over there, the ear goes over there, all these sounds, sights, smells, thoughts, especially thoughts. It's so difficult to control these thoughts, right? They always like take over our experience, and they can actually cause us so much pain. And by the way, it's worth actually mentioning also that throughout the suttas, the Buddha talks about the sense objects as, he describes them as Mara's bait. Good old friend Mara, right? That comes and tempts us with all of these different sensual pleasures. And whenever we fall for the bait, the Buddha says that we're under Mara's control. So it's very important to develop restraint, not only with body, but also with speech and mind. So with everything that we do, say, and think. So in meditation, we often wonder, we see like, why are all these thoughts being produced in the mind, and we think we can control them, but in reality, actually, we can't, because we created the causes and conditions for them to happen in the past. So as we are in meditation, we're simply experiencing what has happened, we have created the conditions for it to happen. And that's because we go about our day in a very unrestrained way. But on the opposite, if actually most of the time when we're not, most of the day, which we're not spending in perhaps formal meditation, if we actually restrain body, speech, and mind, we then create the conditions for when we sit down in formal meditation to actually have a peaceful, more quiet mind. And how do we restrain ourselves? Through body, speech, and mind. Well, the Buddha gave us, out of compassion, once again, some really skillful ways to create new habits. So for the monastics, we have the Patimokkha, and for the lay disciples, we have the 5 precepts. And we can restrain ourselves then with Hiriyottapa. So restrain ourselves with, usually Hiriyottapa is translated as a fear and dread, which can have, especially in Anglo-Saxon culture, some perhaps, we can have some strong reactions to these terms, but I actually find them very helpful and beautiful because they're quite strong. And I think that's kind of like what we should aspire to, not in terms of blaming ourselves, not in terms of shaming ourselves, but rather in developing these precepts so well that then if we understand fully experientially how important it is to train ourselves and how awful it is to, for example, injure sentient beings, harm sentient beings, let alone kill them. Prior to practicing when I was a lay person, before taking the 5 precepts, I used to kill a lot of insects. And I didn't find anything shameful about it. I actually thought it was something that needed to be done. But as I started training myself in the teachings of the Buddha, then I still remember when these thoughts arose in my mind of compassion towards these sentient beings. And now the idea, for example, of intentionally killing a sentient being is unthinkable. It repels the mind, right? I would feel horrible to do that. So it's actually a wholesome thing. The idea that I could never, stab, for example, someone. It's a really beautiful thing. It's protective, protects my mind and protects others around me. Creates this aura of safety for all sentient beings. So this is what we need to aspire, and this is why, perhaps the language is quite strong in terms of Hiriyottapa, but it's strong in terms of the wholesome, not in terms of the unwholesome. And so when the Buddha describes following the precepts, he talks about it in terms of going about the world, seeing danger in minute faults. I think that's how you pronounce minute. We say minuti in Italian. So like even the tiniest of fault, we see that how it could actually bring harm because it could create less restraint in the mind, which then will lead us to a bad destination, right? The Buddha says that just by practicing the 5 precepts, we eliminate the conditions for lower rebirths. So rebirth in the animal realm and rebirth in all the hell realms. If we practice fully the 5 precepts, so we alter our conduct entirely, then there are no conditions anymore for us to, to go to a state of more suffering than the one that is in the human realm. But in order to practice this way, it's very important to develop mindfulness. And mindfulness of the body, of course, but also mindfulness in terms of recollecting the teachings of the Buddha so that we know an appropriate response. What is the appropriate response in this situation? There's this beautiful Zen saying that says, what is the teaching of a lifetime? Like, a disciple goes to their Zen master and is like, what is the teaching of a lifetime? And the Zen master says, an appropriate response. And that's because if we have, an appropriate response, we're just like the Buddha. The Buddha had constantly an appropriate response for every single situation and also to every single being. We usually have a copy and paste sort of answer for every single being that comes to us with particular questions or with particular trials and tribulations that they're going, and we're kind of like missing sort of the aspects that are the different particular situations, nuances that are affecting that individual. So sometimes we're effective, sometimes we're not effective in sharing the Dhamma. But the Buddha, on the other hand, Samma Sambuddha actually, is incredible. Those are one of the incredible qualities of the Buddha. He knows exactly what is the appropriate response for each individual. What are they capable of hearing right now? What is beneficial? What will lead them towards awakening? And that's why in the suttas you'll see people attaining different levels of awakening, if not arhathood, just by hearing some words of the Buddha. We're like, oh, how is it possible? That doesn't happen to me. Well, first of all, it's worth remembering that if one is born during the time of the Buddha, they already have accumulated incredible good karma. So that means that in previous lives, they have generated so much merit that then it created the result, generated the result to be in the presence of a Buddha. And then, of course, if one is present, if one is in the presence of the Buddha, then the Buddha will know how to help anyone who is interested in being helped. So the important thing is they need to also want to be helped. And if one wants to be helped, then the Buddha can help you. And that's where we see all these, incredible stories of awakening that happen. Anyway, the sutta continues with taints to be abandoned by using. And so the Buddha says, what taints bhikkhus should be abandoned by using? Here a bhikkhu, reflecting wisely, uses the robe only for protection from cold, for protection from heat, for protection from contact with gadflies, mosquitoes, wind, the sun, and creeping things, and only for the purpose of concealing the private parts. Reflecting wisely, he uses alms food neither for amusement, nor for intoxication, nor for the sake of physical beauty and attractiveness, but only for the endurance and continuance of this body, for ending discomfort, and for assisting the holy life, considering, thus I shall terminate old feelings without arousing new feelings, and I shall be healthy and blameless, and shall live in comfort. Reflecting wisely, he uses the resting place only for protection from cold, for protection from heat, for protection from contact with gadflies, mosquitoes, wind, and sun, and creeping things, and only for the purpose of warding off the perils of climate, and for enjoying retreat. Reflecting wisely, he uses the medicinal requisites only for protection from reason-afflicting feelings and for the benefit of good health. While taints, vexation, and fever might arise in one who does not use the requisites, thus, there are no taints, vexation, or fever in one who uses them thus. These are called the taints that should be abandoned by using. So as we were saying earlier on when we started this series on the Sabhasava Sutta, there are certain things that we need to use, right? That we can't really abandon them as we are going about, with our human life. So we can abandon the taints, but we can't really abandon using certain things. And here in particular, the Buddha is talking about the 4 requisites, right? That are fundamentally here in particular, he's talking about the 4 requisites of a monastic. So the robe, the one that I'm currently wearing, which is just a piece of fabric, alms food, which is the food that is donated to us every day by kind lay people, every day if we're lucky, a resting place, which is where we sleep, and medicinal requisites. So it's fundamentally, as lay people, perhaps we can have so many different things that we think that we need, right? But in reality, some we actually need and some others we just want. And it's the same actually for monastics, which is why the Buddha invites us to recollect, to recollect. These are fundamentally daily recollections that the Buddha encourages us to do. So the recollection of the 4 requisites is very important. And it's about fundamentally lowering our standards and getting back to the purpose of what these requisites are to begin with. So what is the purpose of a robe? Well, when perhaps we ordain as monastics, we kind of see it very clearly. We're like, okay, well, that's like, some just random piece of fabric. It's a bed sheet with no seams, no no tailoring, right? So it's just a plain sheet that you wrap around. And I remember when I first started wearing it, I was like, oh, this is kind of great. Then I can actually use it also as a bed sheet when I'm going to bed at night. It's like very multi-purpose. And when I wake up in the morning, this is what I wear. And when I go out, this is what I wear. It's just kind of like, I don't have to really think about what I'm wearing at all, actually. And it protects me from heat, it protects me from cold, it protects me from all the different insects when I'm meditating. It's pretty straightforward, right? But then as time goes by, all the defilements creep up in the mind and we're like, oh, but look at, my spiritual companions. They have better robes than I do. Look at that fabric is of much better quality. So I would like that type of robe of that color. So, the darker it is perhaps, or that sort of nuance or shade of brown is more of the forest tradition, and I want to be associated with the forest tradition. Instead, those other colors are associated with those other groups of monastics that I don't want to be associated with. So it's all this papancha, right, going into the mind. I feel better. I think I'm better than those groups of monastics, and I feel like I'm worse than those groups of monastics. We start creating a lot of noise in the mind based on this piece of fabric that has just particular purpose. And so as lay people, for the lay people, we can see that those sort of ways of thinking are even more so present because there are no restrictions in terms of what one needs to wear, right? So there's, as as we see today, especially in the fashion industry, there is quite a big emphasis on all the logos, right? So if we have a Chanel bag, sometimes the logos, I think actually every year they make it bigger and bigger, as well as Louis Vuitton. So you can see it from way far, far, far from the object itself. And sometimes it's bigger actually than the bag. If we're carrying a Chanel bag, you'll see the 2Cs, or if it's a Louis Vuitton bag, the LV, like really, really big. And why is that so? Because it's ultimately not a bag anymore. It doesn't serve the purpose of the bag anymore, but rather it's a status symbol. So with that logo, you're communicating to the world how kind of sort of superior you are amongst everyone else. So what the Buddha encourages us here to do is to, once again, lower the standard of our expectations and realize, actually, if we have a bag, well, the purpose of the bag is to hold things, to carry things around. So whether we're monastics or lay people, the practice is fundamentally, I guess what I'm trying to say, the same. So developing khanti, patience, which sometimes we think that it's something that we need to just endure. But in reality, another nuance to approach this is just being content with how things are without wanting them to be any different. So if we have, you know, a robe of a color that we don't particularly like, it's all right, because actually the purpose of this robe is, you know, just to cover myself up and protect me, and it does a really good job. And if we're a lay person, we're like, okay, well, I can't afford the Chanel bag that everybody wants and it's all on the rage, but I actually have this bag already, which is pretty great in serving that purpose. And it's the same on how we use food and how we use our resting places and medicinal requisites. Actually, we can focus first on alms food and resting places. So especially like the house, we can have so many different ideas on what is a proper way to live and how we compare each other. We compare the way our house with other people, right? So how much furniture, how much expensive furniture or cheap furniture, or how what kind of style do I have? Does this, you know, communicate to the world a particular message or not? But once again, the purpose of shelter is just to give us shelter. So let's lower our expectation and just use things that we have rather than constantly pursuing more. And food, of course, is the one that most people have, including monastics, because it's fundamentally kind of like the only source of sensual pleasure that we have. At least here at Empty Cloud, we have so many lovely supporters from all over the world. So we have lots of different cuisines that are offered. And so yeah, Thai food can be very delicious, Sri Lankan food can be very delicious, Italian food can be very delicious, Jamaican food can be very delicious, right? So like we then start looking forward to it, start indulging in it, and we lose track of the fact of why actually do we need food to begin with, which is just to sustain our spiritual practice. And same thing for lay people, right? Are like, oh, we're here right next to New York City, so there's a huge emphasis on what is the new restaurant opening up, or da, 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 like there's a chef here and here and here and there. And it's actually all of this papancha constantly being thrown at us, when all we need is just actually the basics to survive and to pursue the end of suffering. And, you know, when we don't actually practice restraint, then we are subject, you know, we were saying earlier, we're fundamentally caught on fire, the fire of greed, hatred, and delusion. So our minds are taken over by that, and we can very much feel superior to others based on, all the praise, honor, and gain. Those are some of my favorite suttas from the Buddha. He has a whole series in the Samyutta Nikaya of suttas on praise, honor, and gain. Because we can start really believing, that actually we're really great. And we have all these things, whether we're monastics or lay people, if monastics are very well supported, then they can start going, oh, actually, I'm, pretty great. I have, look at all like these fancy robes, fancy dwellings, fancy alms food, fancy, medicinal requisites, which are not medicinal requisites anymore, but they become very expensive. And like, we have this treatment here and this other treatment there, and like all over the top. Especially in the United States, they have so many different therapies. By the way, like the medicinal requisites were quite, when the Buddha talks about this, he's talking about something, actually drinking urine is perfectly acceptable medicinal requisite. But then there's also allowables, so tonics that we can use if we are sick. But, keeping in mind that was what the Buddha set as a standard. But when we talk about medicinal requisites here, we can have so many into 2012, whatever, 2011, I can't remember what years, 2021, there you go. I am losing track of the years as I'm getting older. Yeah, but anyway, in 2021 here in the United States, there can be so many ideas on what these what the standard care can be. So when we have access to all of that, then the mind, once again, can be subject to greed, hatred, and delusion, which creates all the vexations, all the increasing of the asavas, the increasing of the taints in the mind, and ultimately permeates our experience with suffering. There was a beautiful sutta, actually, that in those series in the Samyutta Nikaya, well, they're all great, but my favorite is the one of the dung beetle that, if I remember correctly, it's fundamentally the Buddha drawing a parallel between, a monastic that is very well supported, and so has all these requisites fulfilled, as we were saying earlier, and perhaps they go out and about in the village, and they are invited here for lunch, and like this exquisite food, etc., and like this exquisite robes are offered to him, and so forth. And he goes back to the monastery, and he looks at the other monastics, or encounters other monastics along the way, and he's like, oh, look at those, they're not really that well supported. Look at the inferior food, inferior lodgings, inferior everything that they are experiencing. Clearly, I'm so much better than them. And in that way fuels all this sort of conceit of superiority and his greed, hatred, and delusion. And the Buddha draws a parallel with a dung beetle. So a beetle that eats dung, that eats feces, and that just keeps on eating more and more and more feces, and it's all full and bloated, and then looks at all the other beetles and it's like, oh, I have eaten all that I wanted. I have I'm so full. I'm here, like I have this big pile of feces in front of me, much better than all the other dung beetles that are looking for dung. And so the mind of the dung beetle is full of greed, hatred, and delusion, no different than the monastic earlier. And so the Buddha says that all this greed, all this praise, honor, and gain is bitter, vile, obstructive to the attainment of awakening, because it ties us up to all these things that look shiny, to Mara's bait that looks like, really wonderful, but in reality, actually, is just a big pile of feces. So we need to practice. We need to recollect. Once again, this is a practice of recollecting the teachings of the Buddha, using all the things that we need to use with the appropriate intention and the appropriate skillful way, and to restrain ourselves, going about the day, restraining ourselves instead of, just going, oh, look at that pretty bird. Oh, look at that, like, great food. And look at that, amazing fragrance, and cultivating all of these sensual pleasures and cravings in the mind. Instead, restraining ourselves. And that leads to happiness. So it's very counterintuitive, because we think that those things will lead us to happiness. But instead, the more we let go of them, the more we renounce them, the more we restrain ourselves, the happier and happier we become. So I think that's all for this morning, and we'll go through the rest of the sutta. We don't have much left anymore, but between this evening and tomorrow morning, we'll get through the rest of it. So if you have any comments or questions, feel free to type them in, and I'll try my best to answer them. All right, and welcome to some other friends. Hello to Tien and Anita, good to see you, and Chin, Gurgel, Jayanta, Minmo, Nancy, Mint, Michael, good to see you, Putrika, and Hemanta, lots of good friends. All right. And Gita, you're so sweet. Many blessings to you. May you always be happy, healthy, and peaceful. All right. And hello to Miguel and Ginny. Well, it doesn't seem like any of you have any comments. I'm very surprised. Especially, don't you have any comments on the dung beetle? I was quite amused by the dung beetle sutta when I first read it. Hello, Naval, welcome. And it's actually a very good teaching from the Buddha, not my teaching. See, it's actually, as monastics really don't have to do much except for like sharing what the Buddha has shared, has given to us as an inheritance. The difficult job is actually for a Sama Sambuddha to discover the teachings, to discover the Dhamma when the Dhamma is not currently present. It's so difficult to actually practice the Dhamma when it is present. Can't even imagine when it's not present and we have no idea where and how to go about it. All right, well, if there's no question and no comments, then I guess we can end it here for this morning, and we'll be back this evening at 7:30 p.m. New York City time, and we can end with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Oh, actually, maybe I was a little bit too hasty. Pasikatara actually wrote, is there an aversive aspect to sense restraint? Example, looking for faults. Well, that's a very actually good question. I think that's connected to what we were talking about earlier with Hiri-ottappa. So ultimately, yes, we should pay attention to really do things with the right intention and really looking at what are the effects on the mind. So for example, if we see that there's aversion arising in the mind, that we're actually not practicing sense restraint properly, because actually the effect in the mind should be of happiness rather than of aversion. So we can get aversive, especially when we start criticizing others. And that includes ourselves, by the way. So it's not a practice of criticism, looking for, going about our day with that sort of not wanting to transgress the precepts, but rather it should be, happy pursuit, right? As I was describing, it's not that I'm like averse to myself if I see an ant and I don't kill the ant, right? But rather it's actually, we want to go out of it from compassion, from wholesome mind states, looking to protect the ant and then looking to protect ourselves. So not looking for faults, but rather being wary of not transgressing the teachings of the Buddha. But then if we do, also understanding that we are unenlightened beings and going, okay, well, I forgive myself and I'm going to do better in the future, right? So if we do kill the mosquito, for example, like perhaps we try, like the mosquito can be a very good teacher. Ajahn Brahm calls it Ajahn Mosquito. And because they gave him a lot of lessons when he was training in Thailand, where there can be a lot of mosquitoes actually, where just going about your day. So perhaps, we restrain ourselves once, we restrain ourselves second, 3 times, 4 times, and then at the 5th time, we're like, we can't help it anymore, and we slap the mosquito and we kill the mosquito, and that is unwholesome, right? But we can acknowledge that we actually haven't done that for 3, 4 times, and we've only done it once, and we acknowledge that is unwholesome, and we commit to have a more wholesome response in the future. So we forgive ourselves and we keep making progress in the path. So then it doesn't create aversion in the mind, but rather it creates encouragement. And so that's why it's very important also to recollect our own goodness and go, well, I used to kill so many sentient beings prior to the teachings of the Buddha, and now I hardly kill any. And if we don't kill any at all, then we just go, yeah, I don't kill any sentient beings. Right? Like, that's incredible, wonderful, well done. And we're like, okay, well, I don't kill any sentient beings, but I still am prone to telling white lies. Okay, well, I'm going to put effort in trying to stop telling white lies, but acknowledging both, the wholesome, both what we have already accomplished and what we need to work with, but without self-bashing, just with actually like going, oh, okay, this is what I need to still work on. It's all right. And Upasika Tara says, yes, that's what I meant. Restrain from looking for fault. Thanks for making the connection to right intention. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Sometimes we can get a little bit, a little bit sidetracked, and it's, there's almost like we can kind of see how it can be unskillful to criticize others and to shame others. But then when it comes to ourselves, we kind of think that we can take those liberties and we can kind of feel comfortable self-bashing and treating ourselves quite unkindly. But actually, when we practice metta, it's very important that we have the wish for everyone to be happy, including ourselves. It's very, very important that we are part of may everyone be happy. It's not may everyone be happy except for ourselves, or do not harm anyone except for yourself. No, actually, you're part of the equation. Oops. And Kumu says, forget the name for it, was thinking about the umbrella with netting that monks use in forests in Thailand to repel mosquitoes. Yeah, that's correct. I don't remember the name either, but you'll see it's like a little canopy that people, that monastics, but anyone really that is practicing will use. Very useful to protect from mosquito bites. There are all these beautiful pictures, actually, also Ajahn Chah using the netting. Yeah, if one is wandering also in the forest, that can be very useful. All right, and guess that's all for now. So maybe we can close now for real with the 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you all be well and happy. And so we'll be meeting this evening again at 7:30 p.m. New York City time, and tomorrow again at 8 a.m. For the last 2 sessions on this sutta. And tomorrow evening we'll have, excuse me, monk chat. Also, big announcement. Next week we'll have 2 guest monastics, Bhante Sanata Vihari and Ayya Sudina. Ayya Sudina is a senior bhikkhuni originally from Sri Lanka. So we're very happy and honored that she will be spending a week here at Empty Cloud Monastery. So she will be sharing the Dhamma online via the live streams. But then if you are also in the New Jersey area, she will also be sharing teachings live here during the weekend. So if you can make it, we would love to see you then. And also for all of those who are local, just a reminder that every Saturday we have meditation at 6 p.m., meditation and Dhamma talk at 6 p.m. here on the lawn. And then usually we have a program happening throughout the day on Sunday, which you're welcome to just show up and appear. Oh, hello, Kevin. Good to see you. Now you're local, so you should come and definitely come and meet Ayya Sudina and Bhante Sanata Vihari next week. All right, may you all be well and happy, and see you soon.